Listening to Lifestyle Locker, episode 31 with Kasper van der Meulen.
The most fundamental thing in life, which is breathing, and the other one is environment.
Hi, I'm Dr. Josh Hand, and welcome to the Lifestyle Locker Radio, where we dive into what makes an awesome lifestyle. From relationships to money mindset, nutrition to fitness, emotional health to peak performance, we bring you on an amazing journey to unleashing your human potential. So Kasper van der Meulen is an author and a lifestyle adventurer. He went from being overweight, burnt out, and unhappy to developing superhuman focus, fitness, and personal freedom. He put himself through numerous experiments and challenges. He optimized his lifestyle, conquered the cold, ran ultramarathons on his bare feet, tested countless diets, read a ton of scientific literature, and explored as many esoteric practices he could find. With over 10,000 hours of experience in teaching science, self-mastery, and innovation, he decided to demystify and methodize these principles in a fun and bite-sized manner. As a final test to his focus, he wrote his book within 30 days so that he would have to practice everything he preaches. His book, Mindlift, Mental Fitness for the Modern Mind, became an Amazon bestseller. Kasper now travels the world on a mission to teach others to be the healthiest, happiest, and strongest versions of themselves through transformative experiences and down-to-earth scientific understanding. He is the teacher of the Wim Hof Academy. He runs experimental retreats in extreme nature, and he trains elite performers and professional athletes, all while keeping a playful and creative approach to his self-optimization. So here we have Kasper. Button here. All right, we have Kasper van der Meulen on the line here at Lifestyle Locker Radio. We're super amped to have him. This guy, if you've not looked at his website, if you've not read his book, he's a wonder. He's a really amazing guy. And if the book and the name Mindlift doesn't give it away, you're going to find out a lot more in a minute. So, Kasper, welcome. Very, very grateful to have you with us.
Thanks, man. I'm really grateful to be here. Thanks for having me.
Okay. So I want to kind of touch base on a few points here. I'm going through your book and taking lots of notes, and you mentioned something early in the book, which I want people to kind of get into, which is the power of 5 minutes. But before you do that, I want you to kind of give a little bit of your backstory of how you became you. The 5-minute version.
Yeah, the 5-minute version. 5 minutes is a lot.
Or less, of course.
So there's a whole bunch of stories I could get into, but there's a shift that I made about 5 or 6 years ago when I found myself depressed and burnt out for the third or fourth time in my life, and I noticed I was stuck in a loop, and I was overweight. I was like 80 pounds overweight. I had these heart arrhythmia problems and all these shoulder injuries from being like, I didn't have a spectacular shoulder injury from some kind of athletic feat. I just basically, my sleep was so bad that I messed up my shoulder sleeping.
Wow.
That's how bad my shape was that time. And I had like migraines, and I smoked, and I drank too much. And it's just like this whole, actually a very common, interestingly,
yes,
lifestyle that's not healthy. And I was working as a science teacher at the time, and I found myself burnt out, and I couldn't be there for these kids anymore. And I was like, something's got to change. And there were two things happening simultaneously. I started working on my own self-improvement and my health, and I tried all these things, but nothing really worked until I started to really, really tweak and change my mindset and the emotional layers below mindset that were causing me to have a disempowering, unhelpful mindset. So that was my own process. And at the same time, I was working with kids in school. I was a science teacher, so I got to explain things to them. And also, interestingly, even though my own mind was messed up, I was active in a way as kind of like a guidance counselor in the school. So kids would come to me with their stories, but I was like, why do you ask me for advice? I don't have my shit together.
Yeah.
So as soon as I started tweaking my own lifestyle and working on different things, I noticed that there was a direct carryover to the classroom and to the way that I could help these kids get their minds in order in the same way that I was doing it. And I started telling this story, and the story is actually about about how I was working on these different lifestyle factors. And then I started speaking to these kids about it and teaching about it. And I noticed that there were these tiny little things, these 5-minute little tweaks that I could do with a class of kids, and they would instantly feel better, and they would learn faster, and they could focus more. And I learned that, like I said, mindset is really at the basis of your lifestyle change and your health. So the mindset is basically the way you look at things and the way your mind is wired to think. Below that, there's this layer of emotion, or below it, I don't know, also there's a big layer of emotion to work with. And what I found is the main thing, almost like the main mental tool that we have to work with whatever lifestyle or mindset, emotion, or whatever, is focus. So the way in which you direct your attention. And I saw a huge carryover in my work because I was working with these kids, and kids in the modern world, with suddenly there's technology everywhere and phones, and suddenly there's endless access to things like video games and all these different things that were grasping their attention, and not making them much more healthy or happy. And I found myself in the same place, so I just combined the two, and every time I would tweak something in my lifestyle, I would figure out why it worked and how it worked so I could explain it to people. And I could practice on these kids in my class, and I would always find like the scientific literature behind it and go into a little self-experiment, combine my experience with the scientific background that was available, and then package it in a way that these 12, 13-year-old kids could use it, and could work with it. And that turned into Mindlift eventually, and turned into the speaking career that I have now, where I get to travel all over the world and teach people.
That's great. Being able to explain something to a 12 or a 13-year-old means you really can explain it to anybody, whether they have the highest science degree or, they're a child.
Yeah.
And it works for both.
And a great thing that these teenagers always used to have is everything I would explain, they would be like, okay, so what do we do now? And then I'd have to figure out this tiny little version of what I just explained, and then to give them that as a practical tool that they could actually use. And that's really where a lot of practice came in for me, and I'm still using that experience where it's like, okay, so we understand how this works. Now, how do we actually do it? And that's what I love to work on.
That's great. So in the book, you also mention, which I think is really neat, because this is something I struggle with and I actually work with myself, is, is practicing the actual practicing, creating that habit and creating the lifestyle behind it. That is a challenge for me, but it's something I'm constantly, I feel like I'm working on. Is there a trick that you share with people when you're teaching, or is it really just get down, get there, and get to work?
It's very much about getting to work, but the most important thing is to build a system around the work. So if, for example, people who go to school or go to their job, they know that there's a set amount of work that I have to do and have an amount of time to do it, and then it's lunchtime, and then we have a break. So their system is built for us in school and in work and in the different things we do throughout our day. Like media determines that you sit down at this time to get your information about the world. Old media, traditional media, I should say. There's the jobs dictate when you eat, and also when you wake up, so also when you sleep, right? So there's these rhythms and these systems. What I found is to function optimally is to really go look through all of those systems and go, which ones really work for me, and how can I tweak and change these systems so within those systems I can thrive. And that's really what it's about. So like you said, the power of 5 minutes. If you want to practice something, a lot of people feel that they need to put in a lot of work and sit down and do it. And this is true. You need to put in the work. But they really underestimate what they can do in 5 minutes. So one of the easiest ways to do that is with, for example, a timer. You just set a timer and you go, doesn't matter what I do, what happens for the next 5 minutes, I'm sitting down and I'm meditating. Or I'm grabbing my guitar and for 5 minutes I am making any sound on the guitar. So I use timers. It's a very powerful thing. And also really low thresholds of success. So people, making music is a good example. I know so many people who would love to make music, but they have all these disempowering ideas of I'm not creative, I'm not musical. And it doesn't really matter because making music is good for you, right? If you make ugly music, it's still good for your brain. And learning something new, learning anything new is great for the brain. So the mindset that I teach people is not to focus on the result of whatever you're practicing, focus on enjoying the practice. Because anything you learn develops the basic skill of metacognition, which basically means that you learn how to learn. So with everything that I practice, I get better at practicing, not necessarily also at the thing I'm practicing, but there's no goal, there's no judgment there. I just sit down and I do it. So if you have an extremely low threshold for success, you can go, all right, you know what, for the next 5 minutes, I'm going to play guitar and I'm just going to make 5 minutes of continuous noise on the thing. And then we'll see what happens, right? Instead of saying, I want to learn a song and sing it beautifully. And then you have to sit down and do it for 2 or 3 hours and really practice. And you have the judgment and you have the goal and you're basically setting yourself up to fail. So that's my 2 best tips. Timers, low threshold. Yeah.
That's great. And that's, for those that have not meditated or have not been through a course of meditation, I mean, that's 5 minutes when you're sitting quiet with yourself can be challenging for a lot of people. I say most people.
Yeah.
So this is neat. So I want to touch base because I've looked at when I first heard about you and looking at your website, I see you swimming in water, with snow covering it. And I've done Tough Mudders where I'm jumping in these ice tanks and it feels like, a million needles going into my body. And I felt like I could have ran on top of the water on the way out before, and then I see you going in. I don't see a flinch on your face. I don't see anything. And not that that's a neat thing for me, but getting back to the mind, how powerful the mind is, and you're able to go and hike in the snow. And if you haven't seen this, go to his website and look at these videos. This is like mind blowing. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like how you can create that?
Yeah. Well, I think actually it's funny that you mentioned because yesterday Facebook notified me that 5 years ago yesterday, I ran a Tough Mudder, which was the first thing that I ever did that was like a statement of my new way of living. So beginning 2011, I was still, overweight and unhappy and depressed and everything. And then in the summer of 2012, I ran a Tough Mudder, but it was in Scotland. So summertime, it was basically freezing.
Winter,
and
yeah.
And the first obstacle we came to was this shipping container filled with ice cubes.
Yes.
And I didn't have my excess weight, so I didn't have my layer of insulation. My metabolism was different. And the first thing we had to do before we ran this 11-mile, 23 obstacle crazy course was get into this ice tank and go completely under and get out. And it was a ridiculous moment because I went in first and there was this beam and we had to grab it and go under it. And then my wife, she was following me. We were running it together. And she didn't really get the memo that you had to grab the thing and go under. So she dove in and she got stuck in the ice cubes because there was hardly any water there. So it took her a while to get out. She was scrambling to get out. And at a certain point, this white little zombie hand came up above the ice. And I was like, oh, shit. And I helped her out.
God.
But by that time, I had been in this thing with ice cubes up into my waist for about 3 to 4 minutes. And and this thing went through my head where I was watching this Discovery Channel show that said, after 3 minutes in the ice, people are basically dead. And I was like, oh my God, I'm basically dead. And I told my legs to move and they wouldn't. And I couldn't get my legs out of there because I was standing with my legs at least, up to my waist in the ice for 3 to 4 minutes. And I was like, man, how am I going to survive? And then I had to still begin the event. And there was like ice cold streams and all that crazy stuff. Mm-hmm. So a few interesting things happened. One of them is I just had hypothermia for 3 to 4 hours. So I was literally uncontrollably shaking and, my jaw was just shivering and everything was just like, oh, like that. And it was pretty horrible. And it lasted for about 3 hours. And actually, at the end, I was finally kind of warmed up and the sun had come out. And then I went through this electroshock thing and it knocked me out. I got one. We had to crawl through and I got one right like on the brainstem. And I just got knocked out twice, actually, because it came back up and I got knocked out again. And then I was completely cold and shivering again. So that was an interesting day. At the end of the day, I was like, because I still smoked back then, and we came back to our little cottage that we rented, and I was like, you know what? I've deserved this cigarette. I'm having a cigarette. And then I went, hold on. I can have 4 hours of hypothermia, electroshocks, all this crazy stuff, and I can't stand the discomfort of not having a cigarette. And then something really clicked for me where I really had a physical trauma of the cold. Like I was completely wrapped up, and two things happened. One of them was I was traumatized by being hypothermic for so long. I was scared of the cold and of electric shocks, which is, I think, a safe,
yeah, that's
a very
safe,
good,
yeah,
safe fear to have.
exactly.
But also, I realized, like, hold on. On one end, I think it's scary, and I had an interesting, like an experience there, maybe a little traumatic. But suddenly, my comfort zone has grown, and that's, I think, the most important mental tool to train. If you can. So the first thing is attention, which basically means focus. You can train that. Then you can use that to bring yourself to the edges of the comfort zone and watch what happens internally. And that's the most important thing with this cold training and the cold exposure, is that you consciously bring yourself to the edges of your comfort zone, and then you watch how you respond mentally. You watch the excuses, you watch the narration, you watch how your mind makes up things to suffer from. And then, because you have your attention with it and you can focus on it, you can say, hold on, why is this here? And is this still helping me? And that's exactly what I had with that cigarette, where I was like, why I don't need this cigarette anymore. Why do I crave it? Where did that come from? And why am I no longer uncomfortable with not smoking? And then I was like, well, because I increased my comfort zone. So I think mentally that's the most important thing. And after that experience, I was like, I've got to learn more about this stuff. And I knew about this guy called the Iceman, Wim Hof, which is now a good dear friend and colleague, because I worked together with him. But we already knew a bit about him 5 years ago. He was in the media, and he's been all over the world now. But back then, he was not too well known. And I was like, man, I got to work with this cold. This is a big thing. If I want to do more obstacle races, I need to work with the cold. It was my main thing that was really bothering me. So I went into this workshop with the guy, and he taught me the breathing techniques and all the mental, like mind over matter stuff. And I was like, man, this is where it's at, because I've been studying all these different ways to optimize your mind and your body, and it really brought together a lot of things. And I realized that what I did, and what most people do, is we all know what the lifestyle factors are, right? We have the mental stuff, which is, I think, the most important one. It's getting more popular. Most people know, like, okay, if you don't have your life right, you got to work on the mental thing. Maybe do some meditation, some mindfulness is pretty well known. But if you see somebody who's overweight and out of shape, we all know, okay, eat better, eat a bit less, and move better and move a bit more. And also get your mind in the game, right? Those are the three things we all know. And I've been working on that. And then I walked into this Iceman workshop, and suddenly I realized, hold on, we've taken a few things out of the equation. One of them is the most fundamental thing in life, which is breathing. And the other one is environment, because your body and mind are programmed in relationship to your direct environment. So if you have a very constant environment that is not challenging, why would the body be strong, right? And that's what we do with exercise. Yeah. With exercise, we basically regulate gravity and our response to movement and activity and complex patterns and stuff. So this was a really, really mind-opening realization that there were these whole areas of health that most people completely overlook when they start to build their health or their mental fitness or whatever. So that's really how I got into it. It was scary because I had that experience of having hypothermia, and I had a heart rhythm disorder, so I had heart arrhythmia, and I didn't really know how my body was going to respond to more cold ice baths. So I was like, man, but it was ridiculously well. I was surprised at how ridiculously easy it was at such a high speed. Like within a month of training myself, and with Wim Hof also, I was able to completely calmly, warmly, and totally relaxed sit in a tub of ice for 4 or 5 minutes. All because I had trained myself to be present with whatever comes up. Just have my attention in the moment, in my body, trust that everything is going to be fine, really focus on whatever's happening. And that's basically the key.
That's great. And you mentioned the comfort zone, which is a great conversation that I have with my patients, with people. And I like your take on it. You have you talk about, like you did just with ice, right? Expanding your comfort zone, not getting into, I don't remember if you call it the danger zone or you're getting beyond where you actually can harm yourself.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So you can use ice, but other examples of how you can actually stretch your comfort zone, because a lot of people will say growth happens outside of the comfort zone.
Yeah,
or
which is
maybe it's
true.
just an
But the
extension
point is,
of.
yeah, absolutely. So there's these inspirational pictures on Facebook. They do rounds, and then you have this little circle that says your comfort zone, and then you have this outside of the circle, and it
Okay,
says
yes, I've seen it.
where the magic happens, right? And it always has some kind of like epic sunset or
Mm-hmm.
whatever behind it, one of those. And but the comfort zone is there for a reason, and you have to really understand it and respect it as a tool for safety. Um, the reason you feel uncomfortable with something is because you have data in your brain saying this might be dangerous. So yes, there is a comfort zone, and beyond the comfort zone is usually where growth and all this amazing stuff happens. But if you go too far beyond outside of the comfort zone, you might enter the danger zone, right? So the thing is there for a reason, but it's based on fear. So it's usually, basically, it overestimates danger. So if you look at the comfort zone like a mental technology to keep you safe, then the question is, how have you learned about safety? So if you look back in your life, the way that your behavior patterns have been formed are in relationship to your environment and by testing how the world works and saying, this is safe, this is good, this is uncomfortable, this is dangerous, and to try to figure the world out. Now, once one of those systems is there, it's going to stay there. Because as soon as you have this survival system built into your mind, it's cost a lot of energy, it's kept you safe, why would you ever get rid of it? It'd be ridiculous. Well, just so happens that a lot of people, they pick up survival systems that are not helpful, like I did. And a lot of people do, where they learn, for example, oh, I have an emotion that is uncomfortable, so I comfort it with food, or I comfort it with smoking, or video games, or pornography, or whatever. Or, all these different things. So a lot of these survival systems are not too helpful. So here's the point. As soon as you start to reach the edge of comfort, a lot of these internal things bubble up, and you have to kind of read them and ask yourself, what is it? What is it saying? How did it get there? And where or when did I pick it up? Right? So if you notice, if you can catch yourself in the moment where you're about to, binge on whatever on nachos because somebody insulted you, right? There's this link, and you're very uncomfortable, and you're using food to get basically feel comfortable, and that's why they call it comfort food, right?
Yeah.
And then you ask yourself, what's happening here and what's going on? Is there even a danger zone involved? Well, no. If you're like if you're suppressing your emotions with food, there's no danger in telling yourself to stop. But when you're working with ice, there's definitely a danger zone.
Of course.
And you have to be really, really aware of that there really is a danger zone if you stay in the ice for too long, right? And that's what I love about it. You can't cheat it. If you sit down and you meditate, you can, sit there for 30 minutes while you're having, I don't know, a sexual fantasy or whatever, and at the end go like, oh, I meditated for 30 minutes while you really didn't. Well, if you're sitting in a tank of ice, there's such a high intensity of discomfort that you can't cheat anywhere. You just have to be really present and focused.
Yeah, I was going to say present time consciousness is very important.
Yes, absolutely. So the point is that so I like to follow my fears, in a sense that I follow them back to the source and ask myself, where's this from? And then I seek them out to the edge of the comfort zone, and then I basically play the game of what are these voices, what are these systems, where did I pick them up? And then you can consciously and safely bring yourself a step or two or maybe 3 or 5 steps outside of the comfort zone, but only so far that it can actually catch up, right? So if you jump out of the comfort zone to the scariest thing in the world, it could turn out right. Like, a lot of people, they're incredibly scared of bungee jumping for good reasons. And then after you do it, you're like, oh, actually, it wasn't that bad because you survived. But in a lot of cases, it's better to take 1 or 2 steps out of the comfort zone and kind of see if it can catch up. So the goal is to be able to do more things with the same subjective level of comfort. And that means it's grown. If your comfort zone stays small, but you keep doing scary stuff outside, which is too far outside of the comfort zone, you'll just get more scared, right? And it'll actually shrink. So that's how trauma works, for example. So find the 1 or 2 steps out of the comfort zone and watch it catch up. So after I did the Tough Mudder, and I did have this fear of cold and and went through the mud and everything, Going outside in the rain was no problem anymore. Not having a cigarette was no problem anymore. Being cold, or stepping into a puddle and having wet feet for an hour, it's no challenge. Like, doesn't really matter. And like, I've done all of this and now I'm fine, which means that the comfort zone has grown. So that was one of the most horrible experiences of my life, getting hypothermia, in this horrible field of mud in Scotland. And running 11 miles was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Now I run 11 miles for breakfast, instead of breakfast, actually.
Exactly.
I sit in a tank of ice. I take an ice bath for 2 to 3 minutes, and I go run a half marathon, and then I have breakfast. So the zone within which all the things lay that I'm comfortable with has just grown tremendously. And to me, that's really what self-improvement is all about.
That's great. I mean, I really like that. And for everybody listening, you realize or watching, that's different for everybody. Not everybody's going to want to use the ice bath. I started maybe I'm going to say a month or a month and a half before my marathon that I did, a trail marathon. I was using a sauna, like intermittent in the sauna for 20 to 30 minutes. And then I was also using not ice, but I was using that really the cold showers. And it made a huge mental difference, knowing where my stress levels or my comfort levels can be. But I know I'd run the distance. I know I'd run 15 or 18 miles. I'd never run a marathon yet. But I know if I can put my body to these certain thresholds, if you will, and get more comfortable, not comfortable, get more comfortable with it, what's a few more miles for the body.
And that's also what for me running has taught me. It is really about finding the zone where this little voice pops up that says, hey, you can just stop and you just sit down and relax. You don't have to do this. Look, and this hurts and that hurts, and it amplifies all the scary stuff. And then you go, not today, I'm going to run. And the same thing is when you're in the shower. And I would advise people to do showers. Like, don't immediately go into an ice bath. Yes. A lot of people could do it, but it's pretty intense, and you don't want to overdo it like me and get traumatized. But a cold shower works fine. You start with a warm shower, and then you're comfortable, you're fine. And then that there's going to be a point where you're going to say, now I'm going to take the cold shower. And where you're going to turn off the hot water and turn on the cold water and just stand there until you catch your breath. And that is where it happens. That's where it starts. As soon as you make the decision, you go, just a little warmer before I go, or maybe not today, or how am I going to do it? And every single time you have to kind of like step out of that comfort zone, find, that little bit of tension, and just work with it. And that's a great statement to start your day with. But there's a lot of other ways to do it. Like I work. So one of the things I do now is I teach a small group of other speakers and coaches who want to basically build a business like mine. So it's called the Mindlift Mastermind. And there's some people in there who have their comfort zone is really much in the social. Their comfort zone challenges are really much in the social sphere. So, for example, getting in front of a crowd and speaking, or shaking somebody's hand and just looking them in the eye for 5 seconds, right? That kind of stuff. And for everybody, it's different. And sometimes I give people the assignment of, if you really want to challenge your comfort zone, go to like a social place, like an open wherever, like a train station, and lay down on the floor for 10 minutes and just don't do anything else. Just lay down or go buy coffee at Starbucks and try to get a discount. And you just go like, hey, this coffee is $2.60, and you go, how about two? Or just go, negotiate about the price of coffee, stuff like that. These are all very, very uncomfortable when you do it, but then afterwards you go, hold on, that was actually kind of fun. And, you train also the skill of bravery of saying, hey, I'm scared, but doing it anyway.
Yeah. So, I mean, and you're kind of saying without saying right now, like with that, you're changing on, or you're focusing on changing your behavior versus changing who you are, right? Your identity.
Yes, absolutely.
And, Those are those 5 minutes at a clip, or you can do 10 minutes on a floor of a train station. I wouldn't recommend doing that in New York, but
probably not. Well, I think there's people do it in New York, but go to wherever it's crowded and just see what happens. I think people in New York are pretty used to weird stuff happening around.
Yes. I remember when people in Bluetooth came out,
they get trampled on.
Yeah, we would see people walking, talking, and I'd be, oh my God, that person's talking to themselves. That would be like the norm. And then Bluetooth came out. It was no different. People look like they're talking to themselves as they're walking. I'm like, oh, yeah, that person's on the phone now. But yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that one important thing to understand is that the healthy choice is not always the most socially accepted. So, if I'm outside and I'm running, right, in the winter and I'm on my bare feet, I'm only wearing shorts, nothing else, and it's freezing and snowing and whatever, and I'm running and I'm happy, and people they they get upset and they think, oh, there's this guy who's totally lost it and he probably called the cops or whatever. And another thing, like one thing that I did when I wanted to stop smoking is first I kind of I looked at how much I smoked and I go, okay, so I could probably do half. So I went to from 10 to 5 cigarettes and I put those cigarettes on set moments in the day, like in the morning, lunch break, whatever, like the golden cigarettes for smokers. They know what I'm talking about. And then I started exchanging one of the cigarettes for a set of 25 push-ups. So instead of having my lunch break and going for a cigarette, I would replace my lunch break cigarette with 25 push-ups, right? So imagine this scenario in a job or in a party or wherever, and people go like, hey, let's go outside and smoke. And everybody's, oh yeah, sure, fine, see you later. Or you know what, I'll join you. And I go, okay, see you later. I'll do my push-ups, and I do the push-ups. And then suddenly they're like, come on, Kasper, that's totally, you can't just drop down and do a bunch of push-ups. What are you trying to do? So it was interesting where basically a group of people says, let's go outside and suck hot carcinogen toxins into our lungs, right?
Yeah.
And the other, and everybody's like, sure, that's normal. And then I go, you know what? Instead of that, I'll do 25 push-ups. And then they go, come on, dude, So the healthy choice, especially within your current social circle, is not the most socially acceptable one, which means that a lifestyle change, making a healthy choice for yourself, is for almost anybody, almost by definition, uncomfortable. So anything new is going to be uncomfortable, but even in a social setting, if everybody around you gets uncomfortable with you making positive changes, that's also going to be a challenge. So then people need to understand that you're changing your behavior and not your identity. And as you get rid of all this disempowering, unhelpful behavior, you're actually becoming more of who you are.
Yeah, and I just to share one of my experiences with the audience, during my marathon training, I said, you know what? I'm not going to have any alcohol, nothing whatsoever. And I go to conferences and speak on the stage, and a lot of times after these conferences, and people all rush to the bars. And I'm going ordering water, and people, and friends and family,
yeah.
Is there something wrong? Is there something wrong? Because I was drinking water with a lemon or lime in it. Like that was like the bad thing to do. I'm like, no, I actually feel really good. I haven't felt like this in a long time, and I'm totally okay with not having a drink. And but it took a little while to kind of go, I got to do this and be in those uncomfortable social situations, which can actually, like that, in school and you're teaching that peer pressure, if you will, to do something, to kind of get pulled out of, if you're shooting to have that 5 minutes of whatever, or you're, quitting smoking or want to run a marathon and, sticking to it, it's a challenge. But then for me, you mentioned gamifying life in your book. And I'm like, wow, I did kind of make it a game with people just because I had to.
Yeah. And then you also ask, like, what am I winning from this? Which is very important, that you understand what are the most important things in life, and then really actively making them important enough to change your behavior. So I did the exact same thing. Just last Saturday, I had a bachelor party of a good friend, and bachelor parties are like all out drinking, right? Mm-hmm. And there was this giant bottle of booze going around, and everybody was supposed to take shots. And every time the bottle would come to me, I was like, no, thanks. And it's not that I never drink, but in this, I was like, no, and people ask me they didn't even ask. They were like, there was even kind of like a social control. People like, Kasper's still not drinking. What's going on? This is totally weird. Yeah. So the healthy choice was totally not socially acceptable. But I'm like, no, I want to wake up in the morning, and then as soon as I hear my daughter, I wake up and I jump out of bed and I go to her and I hug her and I play with her. That's the most important thing in my life right now. And I know that the behavior in this current moment is going to negatively influence that I'm not going to have that behavior. And that's the most difficult thing to do. So to be yourself, I read this quote that I had this in my classroom actually for these kids And I think it said, being yourself in a world that constantly wants you to change is the most brave thing you can do in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And another quote in that sense that one of my mentors has taught me is, he says, you got to learn to love the things that are good for you. You know, most people, you know, it's like, oh, I got to exercise today. It's like, oh my God. And you may know the name. He's an old motivational speaker. I think he's passed now. His name is Zig Ziglar. Mm-hmm. And you know, he said people spend more money taking care of a $30 dog than $1 billion body.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
Like, you know, it's like, wow.
Yeah, that's very strong.
Yeah.
And that's also what I think, what I like to, like, I get obsessed about things, and I do it on purpose. And even when I'm not obsessed about it, I try to find a way to get obsessed about it, which is what I did with exercise when I first started, because I had all these negative things in my mind, because I was like the fat kid in gym class, you know. And whenever we would do like something on the rings, and I would hang from the rings, all these other kids would make sounds like they were going to go, "Oh no, Kasper's on the rings, the ceiling's going to break down," and you know, stuff like that. I can kind of laugh about it now, but it was pretty. So for me, you know, exercise was something that these horrible kids did that I wasn't with, and that I couldn't be friends with, or they hated me or whatever. And so you have to really change that. You have to really find something that and own it, you know, and go like, this is my responsibility, and really get obsessed. You know, there's there's probably a more positive word for it, but I like to use the word obsession, because it really shows how important it is. Like, you wake up, it's the first thing you think of. If you set a goal for yourself and you go, the next 30 days, I'm going to do 10 minutes of exercise every day, then as soon as you wake up and you notice, oh my God, another day of exercise, you got to catch yourself and you just go, no, I'm really looking, and just pretend, fake it till you make it. Just pretend you really like it. And you might actually end up really liking it.
Yeah. And I just had that exact conversation yesterday with a patient, and really great guy. And, you know, he's like, "What are you doing now?" And I'm like, "Oh, you know, since I finished my marathon, I've been running, but I'm running 1 to 2 miles every single day." He's like, "Every day?" I go, if 1 mile takes me, if I run slow, for me, if I run 10 minutes, which is slow, I go, "What's 10 minutes a day?" He goes, "Huh." I said, "So what are you doing?" He goes, "Oh, it's hard, my commute, the time." I go, "You have 10 minutes?" He's like, "Probably." I go, "Try to do a mile run. If you can't do a mile, do a half a mile every day. Do it for 30 days. When was the last time you ran 30 miles in a month?" It's like,
exactly
30 years ago, you know, like, type of thing. So those little,
that's really good.
Learning to love the things that are good for you, and taking the time to, you know, everything you said, I think is fantastic. One of my favorite things is still the comfort zone, like growing the comfort zone versus kind of like shooting yourself out of it like a cannon, and then you put yourself in harm's way.
It's one little step at a time. And a lot of people do this like at New Year's, and they have their resolutions and they go, I'm never going to smoke again, or I'm going to run a marathon this year. And they make something giant, right? And which is good. I think it's good to have a goal of never smoking again and you know, running a marathon in a year. But if you want something forever, you also have to do it every day. And especially this comfort zone thing, that really grows day by day, and you have to keep doing it. So if you can become micro ambitious or micro obsessed about something for 30 days, if you can really do something for 30 days, and the chances are you can also do the big thing, and you're actually closer to the big thing than you would expect. And I love this Tony Robbins quote that says, people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. And I think that year or 2 year frame is very much overestimated. And I think that the big, like, macro view of 5 to 10 years is underestimated, but also the 5 minutes a day is underestimated. So, like I said, to me, it's an interesting day. Today is my anniversary. 3 years ago, I married my wife, and
happy anniversary.
And thank you. But in 2 days before, and then so yesterday, 5 years ago, I did the Tough Mudder. So a few things kind of came together. So I've been in this retrospective kind of mood and looking back, and I realized that I've had a lot of ups and downs physically since that Tough Mudder. It's not like I decided I was going to change my life and I went into this training montage where you see me running up the steps, like when, you know, my Rocky training montage. I didn't really have that.
Come on, don't
But what
lie.
I did do is, I might make one of those just to make it more heroic. But it's really just 5 years ago was the first time in my adult life that I did something that was really, really good for me. And I just kept consistent. And yes, I did run a marathon and did run a few ultra marathons, and I've climbed like 12 mountains at freezing temperatures in my shorts, which all sounds cool. But the most important thing in those past 5 years is doing something daily. And daily isn't necessarily every day. It's like, some people say, I'm going to do it 30 days every day. And then on day 5, they skip. And then the whole thing failed and they quit. It's like, and why? And they say, well, because I can't do the 30 days now anymore. It's like, who cares?
Keep going.
Just do it. And yeah, I think 3 to 4 times a week, it counts as daily, right? Come on, give yourself a break.
I mean, if you fail it, if you're doing 30 days and you fail one day a week, my sister's having a baby, and we thought it may have been last night. So I rushed home from my office, went to the house. I didn't get my run in. At night I'm going, crap, I didn't get my run in. And this morning I go, what was I thinking? Really? Priorities. Yeah. It's okay. I'll run a little bit more today. No big deal. But it's really a good thing to notice that that as soon as that healthy thing that you want to change about your life, as soon as you come to a point where you're so consistent that it bothers you that you haven't done it, that's a pretty good sign. Especially if you can then go like, okay, it's not that important, right? But then that means you've made it important enough to really integrate it and to notice it different. You don't do it. And I think that's an important thing things give you a result, happiness, whatever. That's going to be the ultimate reward, and it's going to keep you going. Great. So I think we're at the point here. I'm just looking at our clock because I think we could just keep going. And I know you got stuff to do. I got stuff to do. But I want you to see if you can. Because first of all, I want people to go buy your book. I really do. I'm loving it, and I
agree.
They should, right? And definitely visit the website. But I want you to share if you can just give like 3 simple golden nuggets, even if it's stuff we mentioned already, but 3 or gold bars, I tell people, because the knowledge is so powerful. It's a little bit more than a nugget, right? Action steps that they can do today, not tomorrow, today.
The first is take the cold shower. It's the first thing. Which means at the end of your warm shower, take a cold shower until you catch your breath, like a minute. Just face that little bit of difficulty. Second one is move more. So stand up from your desk, right? So switch the timer thing that I talked about. Set a timer for 20 minutes of work. If you're doing seated work, and after 20 minutes, move around and go to a different position or whatever. Just move around as much as you can. And use timers. I think so. That's still number 2. But you have to use timers. A lot of people say I want to move more, but they forget. Set a timer. After 20 minutes, you have to get up. Just a new rule in your life. I think that's a very important thing. 20 minutes of work, 5 minutes of break.
And everybody has a timer. It's called a cell phone. Okay, so you don't need to worry about going to buy one. you have one with you at all times.
Exactly. You have a timer. As soon as you sit down to do anything, just pop your timer on. As soon as it stops, you do anything that's different from what you were doing. So if you have been sitting, stand up, right? A lot of people talk about sitting is the new smoking and standing is better. Well, standing still is not necessarily better than sitting still. I love this quote that I've been saying a lot. I got it from a good friend who's a chiropractor who said the best position is the next position. Just do things that are continuously changing the posture and the movement in your body. So that's number 2. And then let's go. This is so difficult. I have too many things to think about. Breathe through your nose. Keep your mouth shut. It's very difficult for me, but breathe through your nose. We haven't talked about breathing at all, but I think for a lot of people that are stressed, they're doing seated work, they have a generally non-optimal lifestyle, they don't realize that they're mouth breathing all day and basically chronically hyperventilating. Whatever you do, breathe through your nose, right? That's what it's made for. It's made for breathing. And only use mouth breathing if you really, really, really need it. So, for example, during your workout. But even during the workout, try to keep your mouth shut. And because the more you breathe through your nose, the better your body starts to deal with CO2 and oxygen. And, you'll get to a point where you notice that every single breath you take is slower, which means that you're more efficient and you're more optimally using, the chemistry that's coming in and out with the air.
That's great. I like that one. I'm going to try that tomorrow with my run.
Yeah, I've had to really take 10 steps back, because I used to be able to run easy. And then I was like, no, I'm going to, and I switched to barefoot running, which made me have to start over completely, which was a big game changer. Mm-hmm. And then I started to nose breathe and had to take like 10 steps back again and completely relearn to run. But now that I do nose breathing and barefoot running or barefoot style, I've never felt like I'm close to an injury ever anymore. And that's, to me, big game changer.
That's fantastic. Well, so I want to say thank you personally. I'm really glad we were able to connect here. I think we have some good stuff happening in the future, and I know you're going to the stratosphere, maybe beyond.
I'm doing my best. We'll see.
You may be running there for all I know, right? But with no shoes on and no shirt, and it's cold. But so I want to thank you so much, Lifestyle Locker Nation here. They want to thank you, because I can't say it verbally, but maybe in the show notes or in the comments, I should say they will. And so that's it. So Locker Nation, we have Kasper van der Meulen, the Mindlift guy. Love him. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you, man. It was a pleasure.
So how do you all love Kasper van der Meulen? What an awesome guy. I hope you do get his book. I've read it. Mindlift. It will lift your mind. It's pretty awesome. Check for all his info in the show notes. Go to lifestylelocker.com to get all of those. And Locker Nation, till next time, become human powered by unleashing your human potential. This is Dr. Josh Hand. Peace out.